Hello and welcome. Welcome to Input English. Today I'd like to offer two of my favorite poems. They are by the American poet Robert Frost. Today here in Northern California we are getting our first big winter storm, which means overcast and lots of rain. It's very cold and gray. And it seemed like an ideal time to talk about Robert Frost because this is what I think of when I think of his poems. Robert Frost was born in San Francisco, only a few miles north of here, in 1874. Unfortunately, in 1885, when he was 11, his father died of tuberculosis, and the family could no longer maintain themselves in San Francisco. So they moved cross country to Massachusetts to be with his grandparents. He briefly attended Dartmouth College and then later attended Harvard. He published his first poem when he was still in high school. Robert Frost's poetry has been widely taught in the public schools in the United States, and that was my first exposure to his work. Looking back to my educational experience in the public school, I am basically grateful and satisfied. But on the subject of poetry, there is some circumstantial evidence that some of the teachers may have been trying to prevent poetry or may have been trying to protect us from poetry, because some of the things that were done when we were students were rather unpleasant. We were forced to memorize poems. We were forced to recite poems in front of the class. And this, for school-age children, sometimes was fairly traumatic. Poems were analyzed as if they were riddles. And so this whole experience served me well as a poetry repellent for many years. And it was many years later when I started reading outside of my discipline, reading for pleasure, reading literature, that I started reading poetry. More recently, I've watched some YouTube videos by Andrew Bashford. His YouTube channel is called Writing with Andrew. He is a scholar in the field of rhetoric and poetry, and his YouTube channel is quite charming. The reason I bring up Andrew is because in one of his videos, he provided the advice to us that we should not look at poetry as a riddle. Poetry doesn't need to be solved. It needs to be read and enjoyed. For those of you who are interested in poetry, I can recommend Andrew Bashford's channel, which again is Writing with Andrew. He speaks very clearly, is easy to understand, and if you like the subject matter of his videos, you may find it very satisfying as content for the language learner. This first poem is entitled The Road Not Taken. It was published in 1915. So here is The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as far that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that made all the difference. This next poem was published in 1923. It is entitled Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Whose woods these are, I think I know. His house is in the village, though. He will not see me stopping here to watch his woods fill up with snow. My little horse must think it queer to stop without a farmhouse near, between the woods and frozen lake, the darkest evening of the year. He gives his harness bells a shake to ask if there is some mistake. The only other sounds the sweep of easy wind and downy flake. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. And miles to go before I sleep. I selected these two poems because they are quite dear to me. I cannot recall which of my teachers shared them, or even whether they were taught to us by the same one teacher. I don't recall that. But I can remember since childhood thinking very fondly of those two poems. Many times I was wishing that other poetry could be so approachable. That's why I offered these two. They are indeed among my favorites, but they're very approachable. So I hope you enjoyed these. I invite comments below. I hope you'll join us in future videos. We'll see you soon.